Hey kids, spring break is over. I hope you had a lot of fun this week. I did. And we are ready to get back to some dividing decimals where we left off before spring break started. So get your high energy drink. I got mine, and let's do this. Okay. Alright, so yeah, I hope you all had a chance to play some games over the holiday. If not, get to mess around with Snapchat and take a real good picture of yourself like I got to do with me. Alright, but no, seriously, let's get back to some work. Alright, so it is week 5, Monday. We're dividing decimals. It's 4/20/2020. That's a coincidence, isn't it? 20/20/20, yeah. Alright, and so when we left off last week, we were talking about dividing with decimal numbers. And we had two strategies we were using. One was either we're going to just line up our decimal point, or we did the decimal partner dance. Alright, and when do we use those? Well, we know that you have to pay attention to the divisor when you're dividing to decide what you're going to do. Alright, now remember the divisor is the number that you are dividing by. You have the dividend, your divisor, and your answer is the quotient. Alright, so the different divisors that we might have, we might be dividing a decimal number by a whole number. So here we have 7 80/100 divided by 60. And so we know this will be a situation where you're just going to line up the decimal into the quotient. Or perhaps we have a decimal number that's divided by a decimal number. So here we see our divisor is a decimal number. And so we know we're going to have to do that decimal partner dance by writing an equivalent problem. And we know we're going to have to multiply this 10 times, make it 10 times bigger so that we make that into a whole number. And if we multiply this by 10, then we have to do the same thing in our dividend and move our decimal point over times 10, make a new number, and then we're going to move that decimal point up into the quotient and then do our long division. And then there's one more situation you might have, and that is what might appear to be a whole number divided by a whole number. Now we know there's 3 ways to write a division problem. 5 divided by 10, we can write it in the sentence, or that could be written in a fraction form. The dividend becomes our numerator, and the divisor becomes the denominator. Or if I was writing with a division box, my dividend goes inside the box and my divisor on the outside of the box. And so I would have this situation right here where I'm going to have an answer that's less than 1, and I'm going to write it as a decimal number instead of a fraction. So let's start on solving some of these problems. Go ahead and get some paper and pencil or a whiteboard. We're going to begin with this problem that we're going to be dividing by a whole number. So on your paper, I want you to write the number 7 80/100 divided by the whole number 60. Now, since we are dividing by a whole number, we're going to just go straight up on our decimal point. One way of remembering that is if you think about this as being in the house, if the decimal is in the house, you're just going to line it up. If the decimal is outside of the house, then you're going to have to do the dance. So we're going to go straight up on our decimal point. And then we're going to solve it just like a long division problem. I'm going to say, will 60 go into 7? And no, it will not. I can put a 0 up here and just leave it blank. Will 60 go into 78? Yes, it will. All right, it's going to go one time. I put that up in my quotient. I'm going to multiply now 1 times 60, and I get 60. And then I'm ready to subtract. 8 minus 0 is 8, and 7 minus 6 is 1. Now I'm going to bring down my 0. I lost a digit there, and I have 180. Well, I know 3 times 6 is 18, so I know that 60 times 3 is going to equal 180. And so it's going to go 3 times. I'm going to put that up in my quotient. I'm going to multiply 3 times that 60, which we know is 180. I'm going to subtract that, and I get 0 remainder. And so I'm all done with this problem. And now we're ready for the next one. In this problem, I want you to write down 63 hundredths divided by 7 tenths. Alright, so this is an example of one that we're going to have to do the decimal partner dance. I'm looking outside of the house and I can see I have a decimal, so I'm going to have to do some dancing. Alright, when I am doing this dancing, I'm really just writing an equivalent problem to do my long division with. I'm going to make this 10 times larger so that that's a 7 instead of 7 tenths now. If I make that 10 times larger, then I have to go over to my dividend and make it 10 times larger. And then I'm going to go straight up on the decimal point. Now I'm ready to solve this just like a regular long division problem. I'm thinking of it as 6 3/10 divided by 7. Will 7 go into 0? No, it will not. Will 7 go into 6? Yes. No, it will not. No, it won't. It's going to go 0 times. So I know 0 times 7 is 0. Will 7 go into 63? Well, I know 9 times 7 does equal 63. So I'm going to say it's going to go 9 times. 9 times 7 is 63. I subtract and I have 0 left over. Alright, pretty straightforward problem. Alright, so now we're going to do an example of a number that is less than 1. It looks like 5 divided by 10, like it's going to be two simple whole numbers that we're dividing by, except when we have a problem like 5 divided by 10, I know that this first number is the dividend, and so that's the number that goes inside the box. And now I'm dividing by 10. Well, how can that be? Well, I know my answer is going to be a number less than 1. And I know that 10 will not go into 5. Now, as you learned earlier, every number has a decimal point on it, even if it's not written on. So I can simply add a decimal point to these numbers at the end and annex 0 and think of this as being the number 50. So I'm going to divide 50 divided by 10. I know 10 will not go into 5, but 10 will go into 50. My decimal point has to go straight up, and I know 5 times 10 is 50. I subtract and I get 0. So I know that 5 divided by 10 is equal to 0.5. Alright, and that makes sense because I know that 5 tenths would be equal to a 5 in the tenths place. So it makes sense. Okay, so we're going to do one that's a really challenging one and involves a few more long division steps. And so this will give us an opportunity to practice our long division and include a decimal point in it. Alright, so get that piece of paper. And let's solve the problem. 23 and 828 thousandths divided by 28 hundredths. Okay, so we're deciding whether we're going to go straight up on the decimal point or if we're going to have to do that decimal dance. Well, I can see that my divisor has a decimal point in it. So if I have a decimal point outside of my division box, I'm going to have to do some dancing. I can see that this is in the hundredths place. So I'm going to have to make this 100 times larger. I'm going to have to move it over 2 place value positions so that I can end up with a whole number to divide by. In order to make my dividend an equivalent division problem, I need to do the same thing here in my dividend. So I'm going to move it over 2 decimal places, make it 100 times bigger. So I'm going to make that straight up into my quotient, and now I'm ready to do long division. If you want to rewrite the problem without all of this mess, you can go ahead and pause the video and rewrite it, and then join us again to finish working it out. Okay, well, I'm going to start with thinking 28 will not go into 23, but 28 will go into 238. So I know my answer is going to start over top of the 8. Now I'm thinking to myself, how many times will 28 go into 238? Well, I know that 28 is about 30, and I know that 238 is about 240, and so I know 3 goes into 24 8 times. So I'm going to try the number 8. Alright, so I'm going to come over here to the side somewhere that I'm not going to get in my line of work, and I'm going to say 28 times 8. I know 8 times 8 is 64. And I know 8 times 2 is 16. Plus 6 more is 22. So I have 224. And that looks like it's going to work. So I'm going to put an 8 up in my quotient, making sure I put it in the correct spot. 8 times 28 is 224. I'm going to write that here. And now I'm ready to subtract. 8 minus 4 is 4. 3 minus 2 is 1, and 2 minus 2 is 0. Alright, good. Now once I've finished that, I'm ready to bring down my next place value position. I'm going to bring down that 2. And then I'm thinking about 142 divided by 28. I know it's not going to be anywhere near 8. It's going to be about half of that amount. So I'm going to say I'm going to try a 3 or a 4. Alright, so I'm going to try 4. So over to the side, I'm going to say 28 times 4, and I'm hoping I'm close to 142. I know 4 times 8 is 32, and then 4 times 2 is 8, plus 3 more is 11. So I've got 112. Alright, now that looks too small. I should adjust my quotient. Instead of trying 4, which goes in my quotient, I'm going to adjust that quotient up to 5 and see if that's closer. So I'm going to do 28 times 5. I know 5 times 8 is 40, and then 5 times 2 is 10, plus 4 more is 14. Alright, and 140 is very close, so 5 is a good choice. Alright, so I'm thinking 28 goes into 142 5 times. I'm going to put that in my next spot up in my quotient. I'll multiply 5 times 28 is equal to 140. I'm going to write that below my 142 and subtract, and I have 2 left over. And this is quite handy here because all I'm bringing down now is an 8. And I'm going to ask 28 will go into 28 one time. I don't have to work that out now. 1 times 28 is 28. I subtract and get 0, so I'm done. So my answer is 85 and 1/10. I could check that with multiplication. You can do that on your own. Alright, so after viewing this and feeling pretty confident about each of these division problems and what to do with that decimal point, you'll be ready to do the task cards in our Google Slides activity. So you're going to do set 1, which has 6 long division with decimals in them. And you will need paper and pencil, and I hope you enjoy the activity. All right, good luck.